A woman survives a tragic car wreck, only to find herself increasingly detached from reality as she's stalked through a series of unsettling encounters with mysterious phantoms in the 1962 surrealist horror mystery, Carnival of Souls. And that's the movie we're digging up this week on Movie Bones.
Well, Mary, you'll make a fine organist for that church. Be very satisfying to you, I think.
It's just a job to me.
Well, it's not quite the attitude for going into church work.
I'm not taking the vows. I'm only going to play the organ.
Why, you want more than that? Of course, it doesn't pay much, but, well, at least it's a start. Are you driving by Benton to see your folks?
No, I can't. I must hurry. I've got to leave. I'm going to drive straight through.
Mary, it takes more than intellect to be a musician. Put your soul into it a little. Okay? Good luck, Mary. Stop by and see us the next time you're in.
Thank you. But I'm never coming back.
2 words I learned while researching today's episode, Ryan. Autophobia and scopaesthesia. Want to take a stab at what those mean, based on today's film?
If I had to pick, I would think autophobia has something to do with being afraid of vehicles.
Actually, no. It's a good guess, though. It's a fair guess. Autophobia is the fear of being alone.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And scopaesthesia, it's not a fear. It's kind of like the sense that you're being watched. Even though it's kind of counterintuitive, how could you be being watched if you're, all by yourself? But those things are quite often found together in horror films. And this is kind of one that does it. I think it's a pretty good entry into a film that does use those elements very well.
I think, yeah, because I could definitely see this. I'm going to butcher the second word wrong horribly. Scopaesthesia.
Yeah.
That is super present throughout the whole entire film. Now, this doesn't mean, autophobia is there. But one of the things that this movie did a really good job of is kind of making you wonder at times, like, okay, when is the next thing going to happen? You could go the wrong way and say, okay, when's the next thing going to happen? And because nothing just seems to be happening. No, it's just like every time this poor girl, I don't know if I'm giving too much away when I say this. It's like she's drowning the whole entire film. It's like every time she gets her head above water, she gets pulled right back down. And that kind of plays into what I'm saying here. If it seems like, it's that whole, it's someone watching me always. And it's a yes and a no kind of answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's just, that definitely is there. The other part is there too. I want to make that very clear, the autophobia. But the scopaesthesia, I felt that more as I was watching the film.
It does. The movie does center on Mary Henry. She's with a couple of friends, and they get into a drag race with a bunch of hooligans. And during the course of that chase, they drive off the side of a bridge into a river. You see a bunch of people trying to fish them out. And all of a sudden, this Mary just kind of appears on the sandbar in the river, and they help her out. But from that point on, it's kind of like she's haunted by these phantasms. She has these moments of detachment from the world. And the movie kind of, as Ryan said, is kind of like she's present to the world at times, and then she gets shoved away from it. There's moments where she thinks like she should desire life intermingled with the world. And you could almost read it as like someone who's experienced a trauma who's trying to reintegrate their lives. A couple of the other characters early on in the film actually suspect this. But no, it's something else. There's another force pulling her, or there's another force, tugging at her, but it's not a pleasant thing. The whole sense of unease this concept brings to a head. It's really dealing with death. I don't think it's much of a spoiler even to say that the ending is what it is, because the movie, if I had a criticism of the film, I think that it would be that it's a little too clever. It dwells a little bit too much in the dialogue on what it's trying to go for thematically, when a lot of what's happening around her would be enough for most people, I think, to get kind of intuit where it could be going without trying to make it too on the nose. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I will say, despite for that one flaw, the movie still works really well at being like a mood piece.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've seen movies sort of like this before. I'm not sure if it would ever benefit it to do a better job of explaining itself. Because sometimes when movies do this, they give you like a kind of twist ending that doesn't really tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
You're left with a lot of questions. For instance, this is not, there's so many times in this movie, and I think it's done really well, where all of a sudden she kind of goes into like this more of like, she's having a psychotic break of sorts, which makes sense. Survivor's guilt, just the trauma of the event that she was a part of. All of those things, they can lead you into this, this psychotic state, especially since she has very little help. That doesn't mean people don't try to help her. It's just she has very little help. Oh, she's been dead the whole entire time. Kind of left asking is like, okay, then why was she able to interact with all the people she was able to interact with? Because there was times in the movie where all of a sudden she wasn't able to interact with anybody. It's like they didn't see her. Yes, you have this kind of, she's in this limbo-ish state between life and death. But again, it's like, okay, well, she interacted with a bunch of these people during this whole ordeal. And now you're like, well, what was this for them? Like, what was this whole entire thing? I don't think this takes away from the movie. That's why I'm kind of more or less asking the question, should a movie explain itself a little bit more? Or is it okay that it didn't explain itself anymore? Is it okay that the people are left, oh, that was a supernatural event? You almost want more to this story.
I think actually, I think I might actually disagree with that in the sense that you've heard of like soft world building,
Mm-hmm.
I think this would qualify as a kind of soft world building for around the psychological horror. It's more of an abstract piece. I would definitely count it as like if you're going to an art museum, in that sense, it's working with ideas and playing with ideas in ways that are kind of broken down from the literal sense. And I don't know how much of this is intentional on purpose or just a factor of the low budget of the film. There has been some debate about whether or not some of the decisions that were made were actually on purpose or not. But I think it does work in the sense that if she was imagining this, if she's in the process of dying, and her mind goes off to this place, she could be imagining these interactions while still feeling the tug of death, saying this is actually the reality of what's happening. What you're experiencing is not real. Even though you may want to go on living and you may want to still have these connections with the world, it's actually separating itself from you because you're dying. And in that sense, I could see like there's some wiggle room there. Death itself is kind of it's not necessarily an on-off switch. There's a process of dying. That's how I read it. And maybe this is just me because I'm also on the second viewing. I got more out of it the second time than the first time. And I think actually I may have had some of the similar thoughts you had as what you're telling me. How does this work kind of a thing? I got more out of it this time, definitely. If that helps. I don't know.
No, I think that does help. We were talking about this beforehand. So, as you good people knows, we watch these films on Tubi. And sometimes what Tubi has is they'll have like different versions of the film. I don't know if the sound quality is different, but I will say that the version I watched was the colored version. Color does not affect sound, but, the quality of this particular movie, I was telling Justin this before we started recording here, that I think this movie, like if it had like a remastered version of it where, they fixed whatever they needed to fix with coloring and also fixing with sound, it would just be great. Quality can affect a viewing of the film. We know that.
Yeah, it can.
I'm not saying that negatively affected it too bad, but there was times where it was like, I'm not sure what they're saying, and you're kind of just guessing and putting to pieces. There's some really neat lines. We'll talk about that in a moment. And I did my best after the film was over with to try to go, okay, I'm going to divorce myself from that because I was left going, okay, this was really interesting. It did not go the direction I thought it would go. And also, because like I said last week, it sounded like a Nuke the Fridge movie. Like something you'd go in and go, whew, this is going to be, because Carnival of Souls,
Yeah. And I held myself back because I knew it was going to be different than what you were expecting. I just wanted to wait until you saw it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because when you get motifs like that, like the imagery that's produced from a title like Carnival of Souls, you are thinking like, okay, there's some kind of circus. Believe it or not, that actually does play a sort of role here.
Yeah.
But it's just, if you just saw the name and you thought horror movie from the 60s, 70s, you might think of some kind of like evil carnival. No.
more of a schlock fest or something.
Yeah,
You know?
this was not it. This was a think piece. It really was a think piece.
It was. They gave some real attention to like the theme. There's a certain understanding of the theme that they're going for that you can certainly pick up on. And I will agree that the sound quality, at least especially for me in like the first couple minutes, when they're doing the drag race scene in the beginning, I couldn't even understand a word they were saying. Which is ironic because if that's the scene that, is the only part where she's alive or truly alive and she's not actively dying. That's the part where everything should be the clearest, you'd think, right? Because they're... Mm-hmm. But after that, it's like the sound quality did seem to improve, at least in the version I saw. And I was able to understand things people were saying. There was room echo in a lot of the scenes where you could hear the actors' voices reverberating in the environment in somewhat could be an unpleasant way in places. It's not the worst I've heard that way. Overall, there's a low budget quality. I have to be honest, I don't know if I would appreciate a film that was like more high fidelity especially in video and sound, because I think it almost serves the uneasiness. At least this goes to my impression. There may be other people out there like Ryan or more like me. But for me, it actually augmented a bit the sense of unease that they were going for throughout the film, that it was a bit more low budget and you could tell it. It's an open question. I'm just kind of glad I was able to get that much out of it in the first place. First and second time, I was both surprised how much I was able to get out of it. Because like you said, you don't expect to see this kind of movie based on the promotional materials.
There's some kind of funny things about this movie. Not funny as in what they were doing, but funny for me just in thinking about how certain tropes, motifs are set up. First off, talking about setup real quick. I thoroughly enjoyed that this movie was like, all right, we're going. It's like, there's no introduction to the characters. In fact, when we first started the movie, I was like, did I skip something? Like, did I miss something? Like, we got like a 10-minute longer cut out there that, like maybe shows her going about her day-to-day life and, her friends are like, get in the car.
Nope.
No. It starts you
right in the action.
This movie. I find this funny about thriller movies and horror movies. What's maybe the biggest issue of the day? What are the youths getting into that's going to get them into trouble?
What are the youths getting into out there?
Yeah. And so, and sometimes we look back on it and go, that's so ridiculous. I mean, like back in like the 90s, 2000s, a lot of horror, revolved around like, the idea of the virgin. It really what it's pushing on is, what type of lifestyle is good to live and not so good to live.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's critiquing that or if it's, some movies they critique it, some movies they don't so much critique it, but that's why you've got things like The Final Girl, which that's not the only, that's, early 90s and 2000s is not where that is, but I mean, it's just like usually it's the most purest one or the innocent one.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Which, by the way, just a side note, that in those movies, it made it an odd combination of elements because on one hand, they would, it would seem like you're promoting a moralistic ethic in terms of like, the virgin is the one that survives. But along the process of getting there, the audience is exposed to all the ones who die, who before that you see are very promiscuous about all the stuff they're doing. And it's almost done with a lurid eye. So it's like you're doing both at the same time. So it was kind of an odd combination. Just wanted to throw that out there.
This movie starts you begin. What are they doing? They're acting fools on the road, which isn't a good thing. I want to make that very clear. Don't go out there and act like a fool on the road. It's not just how they're driving, but it's also, they're smoking cigarettes in the car. It doesn't really talk to you about this, but like you find out that she's supposed to be like this little this good church girl who's, all this stuff. And, she got herself in the wrong place at the wrong time, having the wrong set of friends.
Shouldn't have taken that ride.
Shouldn't have taken that ride. I thought that was kind of funny. And not funny from what the movie was trying to do, but like just funny looking back. A thing that was more of an issue back in that day, that's not so much of an issue for us now. It's just kind of like, that's how the movie is set up. I just was like laughing about it.
I had a thought about if they did a remake of this, that nowadays you'd have it where, similar situation, except for the girl is by herself and she's driving and she's looking at her phone too much and she drives off the bridge.
Yeah.
And I thought about it some more. It's like, actually, you could make a movie about that and have it tie into the sense of isolation she experiences afterwards, because what's one of the things we're dealing with now is social isolation is a big thing. People are finding themselves more, lonely and isolated from each other than they have in the past by a good deal. Like it's become a real noticeable problem. You could do a remake of this and it would work with the themes really well too. Someone out there should make that movie is what I'm saying. So go ahead, someone out there, make a movie. There's something with the rights too that the original movie makers, they lost the rights at some point, or they never had them, or they never registered it, and so the rights got bought up later by somebody else, and they decided to use some of the marketing to lend the name to a line of perfume. And I think they described it as, let's see, as seductive as it is sinister. It's a delicate interplay between creamy, laconic notes and the last breath of a dying bouquet. A ghostly embrace that Fragrantica users describe alternatively as a comforting kiss, a dance with the devil, and a morbid beauty. No matter what smells you like, it's clear the scent evokes not just a complex olfactory experience, but an emotional one. Which sounds like something a goth would be super into, but but that's what happens when you don't get the copyright to your movie. Something like this could happen, you know?
Yeah.
So
there's actually a 2007 German remake. It's actually considered an unofficial remake of the film. I might have to go look it up.
People have said it's kind of like it has certain elements that are in common with German expressionist stuff. And when someone said that, it's like, yeah, I can see that based on some of the other stuff we watched on Movie Bones here. Like, you know, what was it? We watched, I think, it was The Man Who Laughs. Yeah, The Man Who Laughs is one of them. That's probably the closest I can think of. But there's also even like Metropolis, too, had a bit of that German expressionist kind of vibe going to it. And although that wasn't a horror film, and neither of them are real horror films, although we did say I think The Man Who Laughs has kind of got a certain horror element to it. I can see why the Germans would pick us up on it. Some of the scenes I found genuinely creepy. You know, I'm just going to go through some of my favorites here, but I mean, like, there's a scene where she's at it's called the Salt Air Palace. It's a place that was in Utah, off of Salt Lake City. It's supposed to be like the Coney Island of Utah, basically, the Mormon Coney Island. The first one burnt down. They rebuilt it right before the Great Depression, so it kind of had a couple of years where it was still booming, and then it kind of went off because no one could afford to go there. And also the Great Salt Lake started to recede, but you're left with this empty hull of a building. And they used it so well in this movie. It's got this, you know, we talked about liminal space before. She's going around, there's a slide, and a mattress, she's walking around in a mattress just kind of on its own. It slides down it, and it doesn't appear because of the darkness until like the last moment. And it actually almost was like a jump scare for me that you could do things like that. You know, you have there's the dance hall scene where you have all these kind of morbid ghouls are kind of dancing in a very sped up fashion. That got me. You know, they're coming out of the water, and the way they filmed that. There's all kinds of little things that made a really good use of their small budget, is what I'm saying.
It did make my skin crawl. But the first time where she goes into that, what looks like that psychotic episode where everyone's just kind of like
ignoring her.
Yeah. You know, the chase at the end there, you know, it's stuff that you might look at and go expecting it maybe a bit, but you're also going, oh, wow. And like the chasing kind of stuff, that goes into deeper things for me. I'm not afraid of being chased, but I've seen enough movies where, you know, like people start getting chased by a lot of other people, and it's like, yeah, that's a creepy feeling. All of a sudden, everyone's looking at you, and then they're just running after you. Not something I'd want to happen to me.
I mean, here's a question. What does frighten you?
I'm not going to sit up here and say, like, things don't scare me, but there are, I don't know, like, the threshold of being scared by certain things isn't like, it's either not manifested itself or, you know, like, you can make me, like, temporarily, like, oh, crap. Like, you know, for instance, that one scene from, the Audrey Hepburn film, that actually did get me, because I wasn't expecting that. But, you know, like, for things in this movie, you know, I'm a person that can 100% be alone. Yeah, I guess maybe things like you're constantly feeling like you're watched can be a thing for me. And then again, even though I'm not, like, as scared of it, you know, that whole where everyone just kind of stops doing what they're doing and then turns to you. Yeah. And then, you know, starts chasing you. It's uncomfortable. It is skin crawling. Maybe not like, doesn't make me like freak out, but it is an uncomfortable situation. I don't know if you've ever seen this film. I don't recommend it for people but you've probably heard of it. Eyes Wide Shut. Have you ever seen Eyes Wide Shut?
I know of it. And I know something about the plot, but I know that there are masks involved. Yeah.
There's like a whole scene in that where, like, again, it's just that everyone's wearing like a mask and they all slowly turn to the camera. That's the kind of thing that gets to me. It doesn't necessarily trigger my flight response, but it does trigger my fight response.
Well, I can understand that.
And I'm like, oh no. If I'm in a situation like that, we're swinging.
Well, I mean, I mean, at least you have something to swing against. I mean, because my fear is like, if I was to explain, and there's a fear, and it's in this movie too, is that those kind of places, those liminal spaces that should have people in them, like you're expecting to see a lot of people in them, and they're not. They're just empty, or it's slightly run down, but it's like there was once life here, and there is no life now.
Yeah.
Or there should be life here, and there is no life here. And if I sit in that silent space, I actually will get anxious in those situations if I'm alone, but in a place where there should be life, and there isn't any.
How familiar with you are with your current trends in media of sorts?
I am aware of the liminal space phenomenon. Yeah.
That's creepy in its own way. Now,
Yeah.
I think people have not taken it too far, but I think some people out there have taken it to a point where it's like, okay, it's less creepy and more like you're just doing too much. You know, like keeping it with like that whole liminal space. Like, you know, just like you don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is skin crawling. And like watching that is kind of like, you know.
Why we subject ourselves to this too, because I will say this, many years ago, when this kind of thing was the new thing still, I think it's going back like maybe 10 years. I was by myself. It was at night, and I was like at 2 a.m. or something, and I'm here looking through liminal space horror stuff online. And I was like, why am I doing this to myself? Because every single sound that happens after that, I'm like, just, why did I do this to myself? But it is one of those things we like to scare ourselves sometimes, and it's one of the things human beings like to do. But this movie did trigger that in me too. I didn't give you my review beforehand, but where did you come down on this?
This movie definitely exceeded my expectations. Again, like it kind of makes me want to go and watch the unofficial remake of this. But as of right now, off the top of my head, I am looking at Belongs in a Museum. Actually, you know what? I'm going to be nicer than that. Belongs in a Museum with a solid trust me.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's a movie that makes you think. It makes you really wrestle with things. My biggest critique of this film right now is just the quality of the film. And I don't blame the filmmakers for that. I just blame time.
That's all you can do.
I blame time for that. And it can make it a hard watch, especially right there at the beginning. But honestly, if I had like a shot-for-shot remake of this movie, I'd watch it.
Yeah.
I think I actually sit there and, obviously a lot of times I say like, I would add things to the movie. I would like to add more to her character just a little bit more to her character.
Okay. That's fair.
But, and maybe some slight, like, there are things that I was thinking about as the movie was over with. Like, this is what I would do to maybe make the movie just a bit better. But you know what? It's a good think piece. It's a good thriller. There's that horror element to it that makes you kind of like, ugh. So yeah, I think Belongs in a Museum. There's a lot of famous scenes in this film. But Belongs in a Museum to a solid trust me. Like, go watch this film.
There is something I hadn't brought up yet. She has one relationship in the film with this, so to speak, with this guy. She's in a boarding house, and it's a co-boarder that she's with, that she's kind of going on a quasi-date with. What did you think of that? Because to me, it's like that was some of the best dialogue in the whole film.
It did seem like he only wanted one thing.
He was different than all the other characters.
Yeah. It was like, he kind of shows his, I don't want to say his true colors, but, he expects something out of her. He's really trying to get, with her in a not church-like way.
Not healthy way.
Not a healthy way. And the moment that she kind of showing her psychosis, what we think is psychosis moment, it's like that, oh, you're crazy, I'm going to rebel.
I was actually like debating myself, like which one's creepier, this like the ghoul man who's like always pops up at the scare you moments, or this guy. And I'm like, when it comes together at that moment, it's like, oh, and the movie's kind of making the connection directly. He had some of the best interaction scenes with her, and they're not great and they're not good for relationship skills at all. But it's like, in terms of the quality of the dialogue, it kind of got notched up. And I kind of wondered if it was between that and the quote unquote good characters, they were more detached, like from her than this morally debased guy. And I wonder if that was actually intentional or not. Because on second watching, I'm wondering if that was intentional, because there is a marked difference there between the morality of the character and the quality of the dialogue. And I don't know what it's trying to say yet, but it feels like there's something there. I don't know if there is or not, but maybe some of you out there can tell me more about it if you feel like there's something to that. But as far as where I'm landing on this film, this is a trust me straight up, which is funny because you were kind of on the line. And I'm like, I started out the first time I saw this as this is in a museum. And the second time I'm watching it, like, this is a solid trust me. So we're kind of in the same place. This movie's not going to win any awards for acting or story, but it's the experiential elements that really make the movie for me. It's the primal sensations of the ever-looming inevitability of death, of being watched in empty, lifeless, and lonely places by forces you're both at the same time drawn to and repelled by, kind of like the way we're drawn to horror in some way. And it's all these primal fears that tap into you on a subconscious level. And it does so with an unnerving efficiency and economy of film trickery. So yeah, this is a solid trust me. If you're having a Halloween party where there's a movie marathon you want to have, this would be a great opening appetizer for you and your guests to kind of get them in the mood for whatever bigger scares you got later. So at this time, we like to remind our listeners out there that if you're having a good time with Ryan and me dusting off these old movies in search of celluloid treasure, do like, subscribe, comment, and of course, follow us on your podcast purveyor of choice. Tell us if you think we got it all wrong, because we can be wrong. And also, while you're at it, clue us in on a few of the titles you'd like us to see do, as long as they're available for free on Tubi, because this adventure comes with no strings attached. And on the subject of future episodes, Ryan, what do we got next week?
Well, we have something interesting. This is a movie titled Foreign Correspondent, starring Joel McCrea and Lorraine Day. The assassination of a Dutch mediator on the eve of World War II plunges an American reporter into the dangerous plot of a secret spy organization. Never seen this movie before, so...
Yeah, Foreign Correspondent. That's what we're doing next week. So please join us for that one, too. We'll see you guys out there next week. And Ryan, I guess I'll see you next week.
See you next week.
I can't refund none of your week's rent when you go off like that.